You're listening to the Two Deep Voices Football Podcast. Lucky you.
Hello and welcome to the Two Deep Voices Podcast, the inaugural Two Deep Voices Podcast. I'm your co-host Sam Bailey.
I'm your other co-host Kyle Brooks.
And just an introduction to this podcast, with it being the first ever episode, it's effectively going to be a football analysis podcast. Not just tactical analysis, but everything from players to managers to team positions to leagues. It's our response to what we think is quite lacklustre mainstream football commentary and punditry. So we thought we'd have a stab at it ourselves. So the first thing that I'm going to jump straight into is a bit of a footballing trope that's been bothering me for quite a while, certainly this season. And it's there's a little bit of a cliche around Mohammed Salah, who has been scoring goals for fun this season, 28 league goals in the Premier League. And the compliments that are paid to him are often couched with the fact that he's scoring a lot of goals for a winger. Now, far be it from me to take any credit away from a winger who is scoring as many goals as Salah is this season, but I found it's a little bit of a tired compliment, I suppose, to a player scoring so many goals. So, Kyle, what are your thoughts on Salah's performance this season?
Yeah, his performances this season have been absolutely wonderful, haven't they? 28 goals. His nearest competitor, is 4 goals away from him. He looks an absolute shoo-in for the Golden Boot. For his debut season back in the Premier League, he's been the standout performer. He looks like he should be winning the PFA Player of the Year. And if he doesn't, it would seem like a bit of an injustice. Yeah, just overall an absolutely fantastic first season at Liverpool.
Definitely. You're absolutely right. I think, like I said, I don't want to take anything away from the performances that he's put in this season and the numbers that he's putting up this season. But this one issue that's been getting to me a little bit, and I think really it's just a result of quite lazy punditry, at the risk of being too inflammatory in the first 2 minutes of the podcast that we do. But to me, there's not an awful difference now between the role of a wide forward, a winger, a quote-unquote winger, and a centre-forward, a quote-unquote number 9. So to me, the shift of this probably started a long time before Ronaldo and Messi. I'll go into a bit more detail about that. But Ronaldo and Messi, to me, are the absolute watershed insofar as it stopped being about centre-forwards when Ronaldo and Messi started scoring as many goals as they are across the periods that they've been doing it. So teams now, many teams, certainly the best teams, are built around wide forwards. So you look at the most obvious examples of Real Madrid and Barcelona. They've been built around wide forwards. Lionel Messi hasn't really had a fixed position. For all intents and purposes, he's been a false 10, a 10.5, a 9.5, a flipping 11.5. There's not really been a position. But Cristiano Ronaldo is a great example. He's been the best striker arguably in the world for the last couple of seasons. But people want to exclude him from that argument because we say he's not a centre-forward. Where this comes from, really, to me, is, if I just keep the argument in England, in the Premier League, because we're talking about Salah in the first place, in the last 5 seasons in the Premier League, the top 5 scorers have every single time included at least one player who's not been an out-and-out striker. So it was Gareth Bale in 12-13, Yaya Toure, who, while wasn't a winger, was certainly not a forward striker, Alexis Sanchez, Riyad Mahrez in 15-16, and then Alexis Sanchez again in 16-17. The interesting thing this season, though, is that Salah and Raheem Sterling are both in the top 5 at this point in the season, which to me, I think probably suggests or maybe hints at a shift away from being so reliant on centre-forwards. The fact that Raheem Sterling's scored as many goals as he has from a quote-unquote wide position, to me, it's an indication that the expectations of a wide forward are shifting a little bit. So it's no longer the case, as it was certainly in my football viewing experience, when Alex Ferguson's Manchester United team were absolutely pulling up trees, and it was all built around the idea of conventional wingers. It was 4-4-2, and it was Ryan Giggs on the left, David Beckham on the right-hand side, and it was all about supplying crosses rather than scoring goals. It was creation more than goal scoring. Well, do you reckon there's been a big shift certainly in formation terms from those times to now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at probably the best team that me and you have probably ever watched, the great Barcelona side that Pep Guardiola managed, I think you see a massive transition, particularly within midfield, don't you? Whereby the midfield the impetus is very much on control as opposed to width and pace. So we would see players like Busquets, Xavi, Iniesta And the whole way the midfield worked, it was just complete, it was labelled tiki-taka football, wasn't it? It was control, and then you had your forward players, your front three, who would be kind of interchangeable. So Messi would be dropping into different positions. You'd have Pedro, Etu, whoever was there at the time.
Yeah.
And there was just a little bit of a shift, wasn't there? It's the same with Real Madrid nowadays. You have Toni Kroos, you have Luka Modric. The emphasis is very much on just powerful, controlled midfields. I guess what you see at Liverpool is slightly different in the way that you've probably got box-to-box midfielders, haven't you? In Emre Can and Oxlade-Chamberlain, who I guess that old archetype type midfielder like a Frank Lampard, who are just running for 90 minutes, one box to the other, and allowing the forward players to kind of keep their positions in the attacking third. And that's why you're probably seeing players like Mane and Salah getting more goals.
Definitely. I think that's definitely a massive factor, that probably the change in midfield shape and definitely the change in midfield responsibilities, where it's not as simple as having two midfield enforcers, two wingers and two strikers, and everybody has a siloed job. One other thing that I think is, in my mind at least, a big watershed moment is the idea of inverted wingers. So I know it's been around for a long time in football, but in the English game, probably keep coming back to Manchester United examples, but I always think of Giggs left-footed, Beckham right-footed, and it was all about crossing. It was all about the wingers crossing. Whereas nowadays, I picture Ian Robben, and I picture him being a left-footed right winger for Chelsea. And his game, if you look at his game, all across his career really, he's patented the cut inside from the right-hand side and shoot. And the key is the word shoot there. It's his whole game, his whole philosophy and plan going into every single football match and every single move really is get it onto my stronger foot, which is going to bring me inside. It's not going to bring me outside to supply for other players and then crack it in either corner. It's all about attacking and being aggressive and trying to score goals. And that, to me, you can see now in so many Premier League teams, particularly with left wingers, it's very, very difficult to name a left-footed left winger in the Premier League. For the top 5, top 6 teams, you go Manchester United, it's either Marcus Rashford or Jesse Lingard or Alexis Sanchez. Chelsea, it's almost invariably Eden Hazard. Spurs, it's Son, and for Arsenal, it's been kind of Alexandre Lacazette. I suppose it's a little bit up in the air with Arsenal for the striking situation there, but it's certainly not a left-footed left winger. So the point is that the emphasis in recent times in England, at least, to me, appears to have been to cut inside and shoot, and that change in emphasis in attacking play should, in my eyes, bring with it a change in expectations for wingers, so that a winger should be expected now to be putting up, I would say, as many goals as he has assists. I would say if you get to 20 combined goals assists, something like what Riyad Mahrez did in 2015-16, which was, of course, a freakish season certainly by his standards, but I would say that's the kind of balance that a winger should be looking for. If we're talking about wide forwards and we're holding these guys up as the best players around, as we do, it's 2004 since a centre forward, quote unquote, number 9, last won the Ballon d'Or. That's 14 years. Even looking past the Ronaldo-Messi domination, there is still Ronaldinho, Kaká, Fabio Cannavaro, who's a little bit of an anomaly there. But the point is that we laud these wide players as being amazing attacking and creative players, and with that, I think, with that praise and those plaudits, you have to give them a lot of expectation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point you raise, and I think it's very on point. I mean, there's always exceptions, isn't there? And I guess football goes through these phases through decade to decade. I remember Arsene Wenger's side back in the golden age of 4-4-2, back when he was creating the Invincibles. He would obviously have Robert Pires on the left, Freddie Ljungberg on the right. But I guess Arsene Wenger's tactics of how he wanted to play football differed than the generic kind of English way. He was very open to Pires cutting inside. Ljungberg kept his width a bit more, but instead of throwing in crosses to Thierry Henry, Ljungberg was often cutting the ball back inside, and they retained the ball, didn't they?
Definitely.
But yeah, it's what we're seeing in England now is these managers who are coming from different European leagues and bringing different experiences and developing the game in England in a different way. As you say, yeah, the wide players are just expected to just offer a lot more than just merely keeping their width and hogging the touchline and crossing the ball for the strikers. It's not the way football seems to be going at the minute. And I think that's the way if you look across the top European leagues. There isn't many wide wingers whose job it is to just keep their width and cross the ball.
No, I think you're definitely right. I think I don't want to make it sound like I'm taking any credit away from Salah. I think Salah is doing. I think he's certainly doing more than he should be doing. But I think it's unfair, really. I think it takes a lot of the attacking burden off wingers, off quote unquote wingers, wide forwards. When people say Salah's scoring a lot of goals for a winger, and then we compare him to Harry Kane, but I think comparing him to Harry Kane is absolutely what we should do.
Yeah.
Because to me, Mohammed Salah is to Liverpool what Harry Kane is to Spurs. He's the absolute fulcrum of every attack. The ball goes to him and he's plan A.
Yeah.
And if the ball doesn't go to him, the attack's not really going as it should do. You can imagine the training sessions are very much the same insofar as a lot of the attacking drills will surely be focused around either hitting the centre forward if you've got Harry Kane at your disposal, or playing the ball through to Mohammed Salah a lot earlier in the attack and getting it out to the wing and trying to line him up one-on-one with his fullback or between the centre back and the fullback. And that to me that's an indication of how important the player is to the team. And I don't think we should be lessening the burden on wide forwards by saying, hey, a wide forward should be scoring nowhere near the number of goals that Salah's scoring. I think it's a great aspiration for wide forwards.
I don't know if I've seen a player attempt to take on as many players as what Mohammed Salah has this season. Every time he gets the ball, he seems like the Premier League version of Messi. He's taken on players just for fun, and it's every time he gets the ball, you always back him to beat the defender. And I can't think of many players who you would say in the Premier League you would back to do that.
No, certainly. I think it's Salah first for sure. Maybe Eden Hazard is the second one as far as dribbles. Certainly for the stats that he puts up season on season. I know you wanted to talk a bit about Eden Hazard.
Yeah, we'll move on to Hazard soon. Yeah. You know, I think you maybe see Sterling trying to get past players a lot, but Mohammed Salah is just very noticeably just carving up defences single-handedly for Liverpool, as you say. The ball seems to be going to him more than what it's going to Mane, more than what the ball seems to be going into Firmino, who is supposedly meant to be this centre forward who is able to hold the ball up and kind of like bring other players into the attack. But Salah just seems to be kind of doing it single-handedly, and it will be interesting to see whether he actually can take that on into next season and beyond, really. Yeah,
definitely. I think most people hope he will. I'm far from being a Liverpool fan, but it's absolutely enchanting to see a player, particularly in his first season back in England after having not really had a fair shake in his first time around at Chelsea. It's absolutely amazing to watch him, and I think we do get hung up on numbers a lot, particularly in England. I know we'll go into this situation where it's all about stats and it's all about the who scored index and the Opta index and who's completed the most passes and which team is completing the highest percentage of crosses. But I think the most telling thing about Salah's contribution to Liverpool is, without taking too much away from Jurgen Klopp, the way that the team are playing, and absolutely, as you mentioned, the way that he's playing. It's you can watch him and have no awareness of the number of goals that he scores or the number of assists that he records, and know that he's one of the best players in the league. Because, like you say, it's like watching Lionel Messi at Barcelona. Obviously, not to as great an extent, but I think in terms of the quality of the overall standard of La Liga and the overall standard of the Premier League, I'd say in terms of proportion, it's probably not disproportionate. I think Salah, he does have a really fair shout to being dubbed the Premier League's Messi.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mentioned Eden Hazard there for a second. I suppose he's on the other side of the pitch to Mohammed Salah, but I know you want to talk about the fact that it's a big season for him. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to Eden Hazard, I honestly think this guy is one of the most intriguing footballers that there is around at the minute. He's been in England for 5 years.
This is his sixth season.
This is his sixth season, right. Yeah. And we've seen his performances during that time. He's labelled as one of these players who supposedly can take the Ballon d'Or away from Ronaldo and Messi when they drop their levels. He's just doesn't seem to be the finished article. There seems to be something missing with his performances, I mean, I guess unfortunately or fortunately, how you see it for him, really, he's in this subcategory below Ronaldo and Messi. You know, where you have that level of player such as Antoine Griezmann, Neymar, Bale, Dybala, where he is expected to kind of be on this level whereby, you know, winning the Ballon d'Or is seen as justified. So, you know, he's expected to put up these numbers of a goal every game. And when you look at his stats, you know, he's basically averaging a 1 in 3.
Yeah.
So, you know, at an international level, he's got 20 goals in 80 games. League record, he's got 104 goals in 347 games.
It's very impressive.
That includes his time at Lille as well. And obviously, he made his international debut at 17, so he was obviously very young. But as are a lot of top players nowadays, you know, players are getting thrown in at a very young age. I guess with Hazard, he just seems to be missing his big moments, you know. I guess the thing that separates Ronaldo and Messi is that when it comes down to crunch time, they don't only not let the opposition players get the better of them, but they also don't let themselves get outshined by their own teammates. They are the men on the pitch who really stand out, and, you know, they really take onus of that match. Hazard just doesn't seem to be doing that at the moment. You know, Chelsea, for all sense and purposes, their Premier League domestic season is kind of over now. So I guess when they were drawn against Barcelona, Eden Hazard his eyes must have lit up, and he must have thought, okay, this is it for me. You know, this is my moment of the season. I can be in the shop window. He's spoken openly about how he wants to get a move to Madrid. You know, how he would love to play under Zidane. And he was on the same pitch as Messi, so, you know, maybe you're not going to run the show, but you have to make sure that you are Chelsea's number one man within those two legs. And I don't know what you thought, but I thought he got outshone by Willian in both legs.
Definitely.
And, you know, that's just, it's not acceptable for him. He's 27 years old now. He's coming into his prime years. And if he is to go down as, you know, a future Ballon d'Or contester, he has to start performing on these big nights in the Champions League. And he didn't do it this season.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The thing that it's really difficult to quantify for Eden Hazard, I know you mentioned that he's been there for a couple of seasons, and his goals and assists combined output has been relatively stable if you excuse the horror season that he had when... I think it must be a real pet peeve for Jose Mourinho that it's dubbed the Mourinho season. But, I mean, Eden Hazard had such a poor... Everyone had a poor season that season. But Hazard in particular, and I suppose he did come in for probably the requisite criticism. But the thing for me with Hazard, there's a certain amount that you can read from the numbers that he's putting up and the numbers that he's not putting up. But it's the degree of influence that he doesn't have on games. And you mentioned games of big magnitude. And I suppose that is the theme. It's that when you spoke about Willian against Barcelona, I don't think anybody was expecting Willian to do that. As good a player as he is in the Premier League, I mean, I can only speak for myself, and most of the punditry around, certainly after the first leg, was following a tone of if not shock, probably pleasant surprise that Willian had imposed himself on such a big tie. And Hazard he doesn't do it. He doesn't impose himself on big games on a regular basis. I think the most recent occasion I can think of that he did that was against Atletico Madrid in the Wanda Metropolitano. But I mean, we're going back months there, and it was a big game for Chelsea, and they came out on top, and he had a great game. But they've had bigger games since, and they've had plenty of them in the league or in the Champions League or in the FA Cup. And to me, he just doesn't impose himself on big games as much as a guy who's clearly got the talent that he has. And you know, with the aspirations that he presumably has to become one of the best players in the world, I suppose it's just frustrating for any football fan, English or otherwise.
Absolutely. And I think what was most noticeable against Barcelona, he just almost seemed to disappear at times. Willian was picking the ball up in central positions, and it was almost Willian who was seen as like the number 10 in that game. You know, both his strikes against the post at Stamford Bridge came from very central areas, where you expect Hazard to be picking the ball up. You expect Hazard to be kind of in those spaces, kind of making things tick. You know, if he's not scoring the goals, one thing you can say about Hazard is that he's very tidy and astute on the ball. He's able to find very intricate passes and clever little flicks. And
definitely.
You never saw anything like that in the Champions League. And as you say, his performance against Atletico Madrid was impressive, but that's a group game, isn't it? And when it comes to the knockout game and, the big nights in the Champions League, he hasn't quite cut it yet.
No.
And so effectively his domestic season's over now, and he must be looking forward to the World Cup thinking, well, I've got another stab at it here. I'm in a national side with a lot of star-studded players. Again, Belgium, as a national side as a whole, haven't kind of hit the heights as what was expected maybe over the last 3-4 years. But Hazard must be looking at it thinking, okay, if we can get a full squad together, I'm sure they'd take a 100% fit Toby Alderweireld over a 100% fit Vincent Kompany.
Yeah, definitely.
But, if they can get all their players back, Hazard must be looking at it thinking, you know what, yeah, we've got a good chance there. And if Hazard can shine, then maybe that's how he goes about getting his move. But at the minute, he just seems to be dropping short. And I'm not sure teams like Madrid will be looking at him thinking, is he Neymar money? I don't think they'll be wanting to pay 200 million plus for him.
No, I think you're right. I think that's definitely a fair appraisal. Would you say then, we're definitely both in agreement that he needs to have a massive World Cup?
Yeah.
If not for the Real Madrid move, then for his own career, he's won awards. He's won leagues at Lille. He's won leagues at Chelsea. He's not won the Champions League. He won the Europa League at Chelsea. The Champions League's a jewel in the crown, but certainly on an international level, we saw Ronaldo do it in 2016 to sort of. Perhaps it's different with Cristiano Ronaldo because of the individual accolades that he's won, but it's always a jewel in the crown when you can get something on the international stage, because it's just a step up. It's rarer. It's the absolute cream of the footballing crop. How do you see Hazard doing in the World Cup? How do you think he's going to perform?
We've mentioned Messi and Ronaldo, a couple of times already. I think the group of players that we've already mentioned, the players who are just below that level, kind of. They have it difficult, don't they? While Messi and Ronaldo are around, they've been born into a generation whereby, winning the Ballon d'Or and being seen as the number one in the world just isn't going to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But for Hazard's sake, as mentioned, he's coming into his prime now, 27. He must be looking at this thinking, this is probably going to be the one World Cup where I'm absolutely at my prime in terms of. Age and physical fitness. He must be looking at it and thinking, this is my time to shine. If not now, when?
Yeah.
And I do expect him to show up. I think I've heard many pundits kind of say that he has this kind of attitude where he's almost not bothered.
Yeah.
But I don't think I buy into that. I think all players who are of that caliber have to be bothered to some extent. They have to be kind of striving for that number one in the world position, because I don't think you get to that level without that. I think you have to have some kind of innate drive where you go, I want to be the best. He's already, as I've spoken about, he's already said that he wants to move to Madrid. That's not someone who's content, is it?
No.
That's someone who is striving for improvement. He wants to go to Madrid, obviously because he wants to win more trophies. So I wouldn't say he's not fussed. He obviously is. He's just a frustrating footballer, really.
Yeah, he definitely is. I think my one concern for Hazard is that when we talk about the disappearing act that he managed to perform at the Camp Nou, to me, I wonder if that's a result of feeling overshadowed by these massive players, by Lionel Messi, by Luis Suarez, by Andres Iniesta. And my concern at the World Cup is that he's going to suffer from the same thing. At Chelsea, I suppose, he's played with some fantastic players. He's played with Didier Drogba, albeit not the Didier Drogba at his absolute peak.
Yeah.
But he's not, to me, played with any absolute megastars. He's played with Frank Lampard. But I don't think he's ever been surrounded by absolute attacking icons like being on the same pitch as Lionel Messi. And what I worry about for Eden Hazard is that at the World Cup, when he's in this Belgian side with players like Thibaut Courtois, his Chelsea teammate, with players like Toby Alderweireld, if he's fully fit, absolutely Kevin De Bruyne. I wonder if the shine gets taken off him a little bit, and even in an attacking sense, if you look at his teammates, he's got Dries Mertens, who's having a standout season at Napoli, and he's got Romelu Lukaku. Now I know Romelu Lukaku isn't looked at as an internationally fearsome striker, and he's got a reputation in the Premier League as being a flat track bully and of only scoring against smaller clubs. He's done quite a bit to allay those criticisms in the last couple of weeks, or in the last month or two certainly. I just fear that for Hazard, that Romelu Lukaku, to me, looks the absolute opposite of Eden Hazard. The guy has got fire in his belly this season. Yeah. He looks absolutely... He's not smiling this season. He's not laughing. He's not messing around. He's not enjoying the occasion at Manchester United. He's gone. He's taken the number 9 shirt off Zlatan Ibrahimovic and he said, this is who I'm going to be. I'm the big man here. I'm the main man. He's had a fantastic season at Old Trafford. He's had a fantastic first season. There's very few players who at 24 years old go to a club like Manchester United, with or without Premier League experience, go to a club like Manchester United and score the goals on the occasions that he's been doing in recent times. And I just fear that Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku are just going to be up for it more than Eden Hazard. And that he might just shrink, as he has done in these big Champions League games.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is with World Cup football is it's a much tighter game, isn't it? It's knockout games where you don't tend to see big 3-4, 5-0 victories at a World Cup.
Yeah.
The games are very tight and he'll have limited space. Defences will be kind of instructed to really keep tight on him and not give him much space. And it's how he deals with that. But, the top players do. And, his 15-16 season speaks volumes to me. How on earth? You've never seen a player with this much quality only score 4 goals in a whole domestic season.
Yeah, when he's been fully fit the whole season.
I mean, there's just no comparison of that. You can't imagine Griezmann scoring 4 goals in an entire season.
No, I mean Griezmann's had a bad season this season, and he's still 4th top scorer in La Liga. He's still picked it up, hasn't he?
Yeah, exactly. He's really come into it, hasn't he? In the last few months.
Yeah,
but
when it matters.
Yeah, exactly. And this is just something that's missing with Hazard. And I don't know. It will be interesting to see how he goes in the World Cup. And I think just as a football fan, you kind of hope that he does show up and that he is actually influential in games, just to kind of like prove everyone wrong, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, I think we're both looking forward to it. It's like you said, there's not very many people who really want Eden Hazard to disappear in this World Cup. We all want him to go and excel and show and prove, but I suppose as every season goes by, that as Eden Hazard doesn't win the PFA Player of the Year, as he did in 2014-15, and deservedly so, as every year goes by, and this is with all due respect to these players, these are tremendous footballers, but when Riyad Mahrez wins it, when N'Golo Kante wins it, he must be thinking, Eden Hazard, I know I can win this award. I've won this award before these guys.
Yeah,
I've got the platform. I'm playing for Chelsea Football Club. I'm in the Champions League every season, and I'm one of the first names on the team sheet at Chelsea. And the platform is absolutely there for Eden Hazard to be winning this award every single season, and a lot of people expect him to. If you look at the betting every single season, Eden Hazard is normally in the top 5 or 6 for the favourites to win it, and that's because everybody knows the quality that he's got. And I think we're absolutely all rooting for this guy to take the World Cup by storm. But you mentioned there being big players in the World Cup and there being Ronaldo and Messi in this World Cup, and they're just not. They are the ghosts at the feast. These guys are going to be there. They're going to impose themselves.
Yeah.
Belgium already find themselves in a group with England, who, for the lack of international quality that England have shown in the last few decades, there's going to be a lot of hunger there. There's going to be Harry Kane.
Yeah.
There's going to be Harry Kane, and he's really going to be up for it. And Raheem Sterling's really going to be up for it, because these guys have had tremendous domestic seasons, better domestic seasons than Hazard's had this season. And they're looking to be front and centre for their countries, and they know there's a lot of pressure. They're used to playing with pressure because they're playing in front of the English media, as Hazard is. But, I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's certainly going to be interesting.
It will be. And for once, with that England team as well, they'll be kind of going into that game against Belgium as underdogs.
Exactly, yeah. It's very rare.
Yeah, it is very rare. And there's a lot of pressure on Belgium to top that group and top it quite convincingly. And for that to happen, Hazard has to be one of those players who's kind of shining. Obviously, they've got Kevin De Bruyne, who has to be, I would say, probably the best midfielder in the world at the minute.
Yeah, I think that's a fair claim.
So, obviously, you've got some good ammunition there. Lukaku, you've spoken highly of just there. I think, that's absolutely justified as well. But Belgium, England in the World Cup, I think, is probably the game to look out for in the group stage. I think it'll be an interesting game just to see how that pans out. As you say, England seem to just be hungry. Really, you saw it in the 2 friendlies. Southgate seems to have kind of instilled this kind of like, I don't know, what is it, an underdog mentality? I don't know. Just Lingard, Rashford, Sterling, the quick boys up front just look sharp, In friendlies, you don't tend to see that kind of speed, but they just looked on it, And I do think they were better than Italy the other night.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think that's absolutely true.
I think they would have deserved to win that game. And, I know obviously Italy and the Netherlands aren't going to the World Cup this year, but for all the stick that England get, I think they performed well against two quite strong footballing nations there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. We always fall to a degree for the media hype around World Cups and around European Championships. But you want to. We all watch football. We all are obviously going to get more invested in the international tournaments because it's a bigger stage. And I think, like you said, England, there is this underdog mentality. There's certainly an underdog feeling to Gareth Southgate. And I don't know how much of it's deliberate. I don't know how much of it is a deliberate outward personality that he's trying to cultivate, because
that's very true.
It would make sense. I mean, it's sort of the opposite of what managers like Jose Mourinho are credited with doing, where they try and deliberately take all the attention off the players and the performances, particularly when things are not going so great. So I think it's interesting to look at a guy like Gareth Southgate, who is a bit of an everyman. He's just the guy. He played for England, but he was never the star. He's quite an unassuming guy in press conferences. He seems like a nice enough guy. He doesn't seem to be treading on anyone's toes. And to me, it all plays into this sort of, you can underestimate us, but do so at your peril.
Yeah.
And I think definitely with a lot of the expectation off most of the England players, with guys like Wayne Rooney gone, an absolutely phenomenal player, being England's record goal scorer speaks for itself. I don't need to lavish any praise on anyone for that, because it's already been done 100-fold. But the expectation and almost it's just waiting. It's just a waiting criticism for guys like Wayne Rooney to not perform when we go out and Rooney does badly or Gerrard does badly. I think you could see it really, really strikingly. It's the most famous example anyone can come up with, I think, the game against Iceland in the European Championships in 2016. And that's how heavy the expectation can weigh on these young guys. And I think, having that removed for the England squad, particularly with how young they are, it's going to be, Raheem Sterling was the youngest outfield player on the pitch the other day at 23 years old. And you consider the number of games that he's played for England and for Manchester City.
Yeah.
The experience that the guys have got. I think if England can just manage the expectation and the weight of expectation on these guys' shoulders, I suppose the lack of pressure and the lack of anticipation that will come from, especially the British media, will most likely play into the hands of England in this tournament, especially against Belgium.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree. I mean, it's going to be the first tournament that definitely myself and you have watched where there's not really any kind of like star-studded player in that outfit, which will be very strange because obviously, we've grown up watching, the team that's referred to as the golden generation. And to have absolutely no, out-and-out star player there. I mean, you would probably say it's Harry Kane at the moment.
Yeah.
And he is going to be the player who probably carries the biggest burden. Well, in fact, no, he will be the player who's carrying the biggest burden in that squad. And, it'll be absolutely fantastic if he could actually manage that. If he goes out and has a strong tournament, say we do get to last 16, quarterfinals at best, that I'm not really expecting anything higher than that for this England unit.
Yeah.
But if Harry Kane goes out and he puts in a good few performances and gets 3-4 goals under his belt in a major international tournament, I mean, who knows what this guy will go on to kind of achieve. It will do his confidence the world of good. Everyone has seen what he's done domestically. Obviously, there's still some question marks over whether he can do it for England. Obviously, comparisons get made with Shearer, probably one of the greatest English strikers that we've had, and he was good for England. He had a strong international record, and if Kane can start to emulate that, then we could be really talking about this guy in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be amazing. It's going to be a great thing to look forward to, and we'll definitely be doing it on this podcast more and more in the lead up to the World Cup. Speaking of looking forward, actually, I just want to mention quite quickly the weekend. I know you've been looking forward to the Chelsea Spurs game. We've been talking about Hazard and Kane. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, game of the weekend, isn't it? I think it'll be a fantastic game. Spurs seem to have kind of shook off this, Wembley hoodoo where they couldn't really seem to put together a victory there. I fancy Spurs for it. Chelsea seems to have hit a bit of a lull in the season. They haven't really been able to kind of find their form again. They were third for a good while going into the new year, and they seem to have that poor spell, and they've never really come back into it. Spurs seem a very, very hungry team. I think Pochettino's done, it's been spoken about tenfold, hasn't it? The fantastic job he's doing there. I just see Christian Eriksen maybe being a difference.
Okay. I was just going to ask you. I was just going to ask for the decisive player, but there you go.
Yeah, I think this guy's probably, I would say he's in the top 10 players in the league.
Yeah, for sure.
Top 10 maybe doesn't sound all that good, but, when you start going through the top teams, it's a good accolade to have.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine it's 2 per team for the top 5, and that's good going. If you say he's Spurs' second best player, which I think he is.
Absolutely, I would agree.
Yeah.
Obviously behind Kane. But technically, this guy is just a superb midfielder.
Absolutely.
He had this kind of perception that he was just fantastic at set pieces a couple of years ago, but he's since developed into this fantastic creative midfielder. He's raking up assists. He just seems to be cutting defences apart, and I just see him dictating the game. Yeah, I just see him kind of getting his foot on the ball and just kind of controlling the game really for Spurs. And I think over 90 minutes, Chelsea are a team that I think they're quite defensively sound.
Yeah.
But I just see them being edged out, maybe 1-0 or 2-1.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment, fair little preview, I think. I definitely agree with you on Christian Eriksen. The thing that's, I know you've mentioned this yourself, the thing that's so striking about the guy is how cleanly he can kick a football on both feet. And it's shooting and passing and crossing. And I think that's probably where he cultivated this set-piece reputation from. It's his ability to strike a ball cleaner, really, than anyone that I can think of in the league, bar perhaps Harry Kane, but that's more in just a shooting capacity, where Eriksen does it in numerous capacities. You see the guy doing it you see the guy striking the ball on the half volley, for example, on the edge of the area. Yeah. And it's just freakish. It's almost unnerving to see a player hitting the ball so cleanly with his weaker foot on the bounce first time, regardless of where the ball's coming in from. Yeah. He's nearing double figures for assists in the league this season. If he really, really pulls his finger out, I mentioned earlier on in the podcast the idea that wide forwards should be aiming for a double figures, an even split between goals and assists. And Eriksen's actually a really, really good example of it, albeit as a central player. He's 7 league goals and 9 assists for the season. And I think it's difficult to back against him reaching 10 for both of those, really. The guy's such a proficient attacking player. Yeah. And I think with Kane injured, it's a blessing in disguise. Perhaps not for Spurs, but certainly for a player like Eriksen, who, having qualified for the World Cup and having been the guy who scored a hat-trick for Denmark to qualify for the World Cup against Northern Ireland, I think it's a really, really good way to be going into a huge international tournament. If you can really pick it up with Kane out of the spotlight, out of the limelight, and it's him and Son, and these are 2 potent attacking players. I think it's a really, really good time to be watching Christian Eriksen and Spurs in general.
Absolutely. I think what's so stark about him as well is that he never seems to get tackled. He's never under pressure when he's on the pitch. He's always in space. So I guess that's just positional awareness, isn't it?
Definitely.
He's always, particularly at Wembley, I've noticed he's always picking up spaces like outside of the box and being able to kind of like whip crosses in from outside of the box, which obviously he's really benefited from Kane, who's obviously such a versatile striker in terms of like his finishes. Yeah. So, I think it will be an interesting game. I think they'll have too much for Chelsea. But it's a game to look out for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I just want to give an honourable mention before we wrap up for the weekend to a game that I've got my eye on for Saturday. Obviously, I don't want to wait all the way till Sunday to be watching good games. I've got my eye on the 3 p.m. kickoff between Brighton and Leicester City. So It's obviously not the most glamorous showdown on the face of it or on paper, but just looking, it's before the international break and before the FA Cup break, so it probably seems like a long time ago, but looking at their most pertinent recent fixtures in the league, Brighton hosted Arsenal, beat them 2-1. So as far as the Premier League goes and their home record goes, they're coming into the game with quite a lot of confidence. And if you look at Leicester's last away performance, it was a storming 4-1 victory albeit against the pretty beleaguered West Brom. It was still a 4-1 victory away from home, which is no mean feat in the Premier League. So I think it's definitely a game to watch. I think it's absolutely not a 0-0. I'll go on record saying that. And I think it'll be fantastic to watch Jamie Vardy, particularly coming off having just scored a goal for England. His confidence is going to be as high as it's ever been. And against a side like Brighton, who really, I would say they're out of the relegation scrap, but they probably just want to make sure they've got a little bit of insurance. So if they are going to be tempted to attack a bit more, then a team like Leicester with Vardy, with Mahrez, and being able to bring Demarai Gray off the bench, I think it makes for a really, really interesting clash.
Yeah, fully agree. And sorry to go back to Mr. Hazard just before we end there, but Glenn Murray has as many goals as Eden Hazard this season. So, you know, that just sums it up, doesn't it? Yeah,
it's a very strange statistic, isn't it?
It is.
So, I think that's it from us. Thank you, if there is anyone out there listening, to this first inaugural podcast for the Two Deep Voices football podcast. So, that's it from me. Thanks very much for listening.
See you later, guys.